You are about to discover top Native American tribes whose names were synonymous with absolute terror. Like some of the deadliest tribes outlined in the first part of this series, these tribes have a strong reputation for tearing apart their enemies with utmost viciousness. They are known to protect what is theirs, both passionately and violently. In this video, you might feel chills running down your spine as we unveil 3 deadly Native American tribes in history. Number 1, Sioux. When it comes to Native American tribes that left their mark on history, the Sioux tribe stands tall. Oh, they don't just stand tall. They ride fast, fight fiercely, and let's just say you wouldn't want to be their enemy. The Sioux were the ultimate badasses of Great Plains, a tribe so legendary that even today their name is whispered with respect. But what made the Sioux so formidable? Let's saddle up and find out. The term Sioux refers to a large confederation of several tribes that are part of the Great Sioux Nation, often divided into 3 main groups: the Dakota, Nakota, and Lakota. While the names may seem similar, they reflect differences in dialect and location. The Lakota, perhaps the most famous of the 3, were primarily based in what is now South Dakota, while the Dakota and Nakota were spread across Minnesota and the Great Plains. The Sioux were a warrior society, and when their way of life was threatened, they were ready to defend it with an intensity that made them legend. Warriors were highly esteemed within the tribe, and their reputation as fierce fighters was well earned. The Sioux practiced a swift, agile, and highly strategic combat style. They were expert horsemen, with the Lakota becoming known as some of the finest riders on the plains. A Sioux warrior's ability to ride into battle with precision and speed was so impressive that they were often described as riding the wind. One of the defining features of Sioux warfare was their hit-and-run tactics. They didn't believe in long, drawn-out battles. Instead, they would strike quickly and fiercely, using the element of surprise to overwhelm their enemies before retreating just as swiftly. This tactic made them incredibly difficult to defeat, and even more difficult to predict. European settlers and rival tribes alike were often caught off guard by the Sioux' sudden attacks, and they developed a fearsome reputation for their ability to ambush and outmaneuver opponents. If one event cemented the Sioux' place in history, it's the Battle of Little Bighorn, also known as Custer's Last Stand. In 1876, tensions between the U.S. government and the Sioux had reached a boiling point. The Sioux, under the leadership of legendary chiefs such as Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, were fighting to preserve their land and way of life as settlers encroached on their territory. General George Armstrong Custer, confident in his military superiority, led the 7th Cavalry into battle against a coalition of Sioux and Cheyenne warriors at Little Bighorn. Custer didn't anticipate the sheer number of warriors awaiting him, or their ferocity. In one of the most famous battles in American history, Custer and his entire command were wiped out by the Sioux and their allies. The battle was a significant victory for the Sioux, proving their military strength and determination to protect their lands at all costs. If you thought they were fierce, just wait to hear how they outsmarted an entire U.S. Army regiment in what would become one of the most humiliating defeats for the U.S. military on the Great Plains. It's called the Fetterman Massacre. And let's just say it wasn't exactly Captain Fetterman's finest hour. It wasn't even an hour, more like a really bad 20 minutes. By the 1860s, tensions between the U.S. government and the Lakota Sioux were bubbling over like a pot left on the stove for way too long. The government, eager to get settlers and gold prospectors through Lakota territory, had built a nice little trail known as the Bozeman Trail, which cut straight through the Sioux' sacred lands. To make matters worse, the army built forts along the trail, including Fort Phil-Kearny, which was smack in the middle of Sioux country. A big mistake. The Lakota, led by the indomitable Chief Red Cloud, would not let a few forts and settlers ruin their buffalo hunting grounds. So they did their best, rallied their warriors, and prepared for battle. This kicked off Red Cloud's War, a conflict over land, survival, and keeping the settlers out of their backyard. Here comes the star of our story, Captain William J. Fetterman. Fetterman had an ego so big that you could probably spot it from the other side of the Bozeman Trail. He famously declared, with 80 men, "I could ride through the whole Sioux nation." Bold words, right? Too bad he was about to find out the hard way that the Sioux were not exactly the kind of people you wanted to make such bold claims about. On December 21st, 1866, Fetterman got his chance to prove himself. The Lakota and their Cheyenne allies set up a classic bait-and-switch move. They sent a small group of warriors, led by a young Crazy Horse, to taunt the soldiers outside Fort Phil-Kearny. Crazy Horse and his buddies pretended to be scared and vulnerable, retreating slowly like they said, "Oh no, don't chase us. We're helpless." Fetterman, falling for it, hook, line, and sinker, rounded up his 80 men and galloped after the retreating warriors. They rode right past the fort's safety and over Lodge Trail Ridge, unaware they were walking straight into a trap. A classic rookie mistake. As soon as Fetterman's men crossed the ridge, they were surrounded by about 1,000 Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors. Imagine thinking you're in for a quick skirmish, only to realize you've stepped into the middle of a hornet's nest, and these hornets had arrows and tomahawks. The Sioux didn't waste any time. But they unleashed a swift, coordinated attack, hitting the soldiers from every angle. Fetterman and his men didn't stand a chance. In just about 20 minutes, the entire force of 80 soldiers was wiped out. The army's boastful captain didn't even make it out alive to eat his words. It was an absolute disaster for the U.S. Army and a stunning victory for the Lakota Sioux, who had not only outsmarted their enemy, but also reminded everyone who ran the show in the Powder River country. The Sioux tribe's legacy is of strength, courage, and an unyielding defense of their land and people. Number two. Blackfeet, known for their fearsome warriors, expert horsemanship, and unyielding will to protect their land. The Blackfeet carved a name for themselves that sent shivers through their rivals and enemies alike. Their legacy of fear wasn't built overnight. It was crafted through military prowess, strategic alliances, mastery of their environment, and relentless determination to protect their land and culture. For centuries, the Blackfeet was known as a tribe that could not be conquered by rival tribes, and certainly not by European settlers who underestimated their strength. The Blackfeet people, originally known as the Niitsitapi, which means the real people, are part of the Algonquian-speaking tribes. They comprise 3 main divisions, the Siksika, the Kainai, and the Piikani. Together, they formed a powerful confederation that dominated the northern plains, particularly in what is now Montana, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. Before the arrival of horses, the Blackfeet were nomadic hunters, relying heavily on the bison for food, clothing, and shelter. However, the introduction of horses in the 1700s transformed the tribe into a mobile powerhouse. The Blackfeet became exceptional horse riders, using their newfound speed and mobility to expand their territory and dominate other tribes. One key reason the Blackfeet were feared was their mastery of horseback combat. When horses arrived in North America, the Blackfeet quickly adapted, becoming some of the most skilled riders on the plains. They turned horseback, riding into an art form for hunting and warfare. Their ability to move swiftly and strike without warning made them a terrifying opponent. Blackfeet warriors were known for their strategic raids on rival tribes and settlers. They used a hit-and-run style of warfare, which was highly effective in the vast open spaces of the plains. Their raids were often conducted at night, adding an element of surprise and psychological terror. Enemies never knew when or where the Blackfeet might strike, and this unpredictability kept their foes constantly on edge. The Blackfeet were not just warriors, but fierce protectors of their territory. The tribe was notoriously aggressive when defending its land from outsiders, and its approach was often brutal. It didn't just fight to win. It fought to make a statement. Stories of Blackfeet warriors torturing and mutilating their enemies were widespread, contributing to its fearsome reputation. One of the most significant reasons the Blackfeet were feared was their practice of revenge. The Blackfeet believed in an eye-for-an-eye approach to warfare, and never forgot an attack on their people. If a tribe or a settler harmed a Blackfeet warrior, they could expect swift and brutal retaliation. This sense of vengeance was deeply ingrained in Blackfeet culture, and it was not uncommon for them to pursue their enemies across vast distances, exacting retribution for wrongs committed against their people. This reputation for vengeance made the Blackfeet not just a powerful tribe, but a tribe that invoked terror. Enemies knew that any action against the Blackfeet would have severe consequences, making them think twice before engaging with this fierce group. For 25 years after 1806, the Blackfeet tribe essentially became the gatekeepers of the upper Missouri River's country. Let me tell you, they didn't issue any trapping permits. British, French, and American fur traders tried to sneak into this prime real estate, but the Blackfeet didn't have it. To them, these fur traders were no better than poachers, showing up uninvited to cash in on the land's riches. And if there was one thing the Blackfeet didn't like, it was outsiders coming in and messing with their beaver business. The Blackfeet had no problem making life extremely difficult for any trespassers. 3. Cheyenne. Tribe the Cheyenne weren't the kind of folks you'd want to meet in a dark canyon at high noon. They were masters of guerrilla warfare, ambushing their enemies with such precision that even seasoned generals would rethink their strategy. Imagine riding into their territory and suddenly being surrounded by warriors who could shoot an arrow through the eye of a needle while riding full tilt on horseback. But it wasn't just their fighting skills that struck fear into hearts across the frontier. It was their sheer determination to protect what was theirs. The Cheyenne were fiercely territorial and wouldn't let anyone walk all over them. They defended their lands with a ferocity that could rival a mama grizzly protecting her cubs. First things first, the Cheyenne weren't just about brute strength. They had that in spades, but their true power came from their military strategy. The Cheyenne were masters of planning and warfare, turning the wide-open plains into their chessboard. They knew how to outthink and outmaneuver their enemies, striking when least expected and disappearing like ghosts into the vast landscape when needed. Of course, being smart isn't enough to become feared across the plains. The Cheyenne also backed up their strategies with serious fighting skills. Their warriors were some of the best trained, most disciplined fighters in the Native American world. They were incredibly skilled with bows, arrows, spears, and, later on, guns, which they used with deadly precision. The Cheyenne's bravery was legendary. Their warriors followed strict honor codes and often fought to the death rather than retreat. That level of fearlessness would send shivers down the spine of any opponent. After all, it's one thing to face someone who fights to win. It's another thing entirely to face someone who fights without fear of death. What made the Cheyenne even more terrifying was their organization into warrior societies. These weren't just guys with weapons. They were highly organized, with different groups responsible for different aspects of warfare and protection. One such society was the Cheyenne Dog Soldiers. These guys were the Cheyenne's elite warriors, the best of the best. Think of them like the Navy SEALs of the Cheyenne. If the Dog Soldiers were coming after you, it was game over. They were known for their fierce loyalty to the tribe and for standing their ground, literally. They carried stakes they drive into the ground during battle, symbolizing that they would not retreat. If they put that stake down, you knew they weren't going anywhere, and you'd have to fight them to the death. If there's one thing that makes a strong tribe even stronger, it's powerful friends. The Cheyenne formed alliances with other formidable tribes, most notably the Lakota Sioux and the Arapaho. This alliance was no small thing. It created a powerful force that even the U.S. Army found itself in trouble when trying to push through their territories. Imagine being an outsider trying to settle in the Great Plains, only to find out you weren't just dealing with the Cheyenne. You were dealing with a trio of terrifying tribes, each as fierce as the next. Perhaps one of the most famous battles, highlighting the Cheyenne's fearsome reputation, is the Battle of the Little Bighorn, also known as Custer's Last Stand. In 1876, the Cheyenne, alongside their Lakota Arapaho allies, wiped out General George Custer and his 7th Cavalry in one of American history's most famous military defeats. Custer, confident that he could take on the Native American forces, severely underestimated the Cheyenne and their allies. The result? A complete massacre of his troops. Even today, the Cheyenne's legacy as fierce warriors lives on. While past battles may be over, their story inspires admiration for a people who stood strong despite overwhelming odds. What do you think of these big three? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Do remember to give us a like and subscribe for more insight into the lives of indigenous tribes.